Good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going? Very tired. Screezilla here. And, yeah, you join me to look at the latest announcement. We have had the Brooklyn class cruiser announced. And now we've had the Kirov. No, actually, I need to switch my webcam on right now. Hold on, let's just do that. And, let's just bring the webcam into frame and get this all set up, because it's the Kirov light cruiser. Yes, the light cruiser. Sorry, I just had to add in exclamation marks there from air quotes. It was needed for this video. So yeah, the Kirov light cruiser, the Baltic Fleet Warrior. The Project Class 26 and 26 bis included 6 Soviet cruisers built during the second half of the 1930s, on the basis of an existing Italian light cruiser of the time. Now, one thing to know about the Russian fleet is there is a lot of Italian-style ships. Actually, later on, there are a lot of Italian ships in the Russian fleet, in the Baltic fleet. After World War II, the Russians got a lot of Italian ships, and prior to World War II, they were a lot. And actually, with getting ships, they were actually going to be getting ships from Germany and Italy, places like that. They were looking to improve their arsenal. Anyway, tangent, getting off track. Soon, War Thunder captains will have the chance to take command of the lead ship of the class, the Kirov itself, with the release of the upcoming update 1.87. Briefly, a 1930s Soviet light cruiser, but differs from classmates in its devastating firepower. The Kirov will be coming to War Thunder as part of upcoming Update 1.87 as a new addition to the Soviet light cruiser line, although technically being a heavy cruiser, according to standards set by the London Naval Treaty. We've decided to add the Kirov as a light cruiser, not only because it was built and classified as one by the Soviets themselves, but also due to the fact that its performance doesn't even nearly match that of actual contemporary heavy cruisers of other nations. Bullshit! Sorry, I've got a bit of bullshit. Sorry, a bit of a cough there coming on. Yeah, not too well. Yeah, sorry about the lighting. I could probably put better lights on, but I wasn't expecting to do webcams, so, whatever. What makes the Kirov... the Kirov could historically only achieve a very limited rate of fire with its main guns due to the cramped conditions inside of the arguably undersized main battery turrets. This major drawback will also be reflected in-game, with the Kirov having a significantly longer reload rate than existing light cruisers. Well, good, that is something. Complementing the primary armament are 6 100mm dual-purpose cannons split into 2 groups of 3 on each side of the hull. These will especially come in handy in close-range engagements, helping to fend off hostile ships, while the main guns reload. In addition, the guns contain the shells with radio fuses, which are a serious threat to airborne targets. Additionally, captains of the Kirov will also have access to 2 triple torpedo launchers mounted on each side of the hull as well. However, the anti-air armament of the Kirov is made of 7 45mm cannons and 3 12.7mm heavy machine guns. In combination with its universal artillery, this makes the Kirov AA quite effective, so that in combined battles, the ship commander will not have to worry about aerial threats. I don't know why they say in combined battles, because every battle is a combined battle for ships. You don't get ship the ship, you get ship the plane. There is no other option, so, why even make a statement on that? Fun fact, 2 Kirov's main battery turrets are preserved as part of a public monument in St. Petersburg today, the city it once defended from German occupation. The Kirov is able to achieve a top speed of 36 knots, 66.5 kilometers per hour, making the mobility comparable to existing light cruisers in the game. The Kirov is protected by 50mm of armour, comprising its belt and turret armour, and another 150mm of armour protecting its conning tower. All of this means that the cruiser is on par with its peers in terms of armour and in terms of main caliber turret protection. Overall, the Kirov is a warship that can most certainly dish out tremendous amounts of damage with a single salvo and can cause a lot of destruction in the hands of a capable captain. According to the key important parameters, the cruiser is a strong all-round ship able to stand up for itself in most conceivable situations in naval battles. The Kirov has already been sighted on the horizon and has reportedly set course for Wolf under naval battles, expected to arrive in the release of 1.87. Until then, calm seas, captains. So the Kirov's coming to game. Now, first of all, let's just say this is a beautiful model. Like, the rendering's beautiful as always, you know, the models always look good. The main thing with the Kirov is it has 3 super turrets with 3 180mm guns on board, and they're long barrels. These are going to be highly accurate, highly powerful, and high velocity shells. These are the guns of a heavy cruiser. This is a heavy cruiser. They're the bullshitting around the light cruiser. This is termed as a heavy cruiser. This is a heavy cruiser. This is technically a heavy cruiser. And it's silly to be naming it and going, actually, no, it wasn't really that heavy. The Soviets classed it as a light cruiser. No, you go off universal terms. The way they're talking about it here basically is the same as if, say, you know, they decided to give the IS-7 scouting because it can go quite fast. You know, there is these parameters for a reason. I was talking about in my earlier video today the fact that we might be seeing something like the like the armoured cruisers for Germany. You know, it's very possible we could see those because, well, they're not heavy cruisers, they're armoured cruisers, they're different. You know, they can still be classed as a light cruiser in War Thunder's terms. But, you know, they have 200mm guns. But, you know, I mean, under the London Treaty, they could still be classified as a light cruiser. You know, you can't start doing that. You have to actually start classifying these vehicles what they are actually classified as. Yes, the Soviets did classify this as a light cruiser, but they didn't really... Well, they did have some heavier cruisers at the time. The Kirov is a very important ship.
Yes, think of my new ducky tie. Cute, right? And not that much more.
And that was bizarre. I don't know why that just started playing. Yes, I am watching How I Met Your Mother. But it's a very important ship for Russia. The defense of St. Petersburg, as it is known now, it played a pivotal role. It was doing a lot of bombardment from the seas. The Russian ships at this time needed very good anti-air support because they were struggling with the German Luftwaffe and the Ju-87s, things like that. But as I say, the Kirov is not a light cruiser. It is a heavy cruiser. This is a heavy cruiser, and this is the way that they're going to be moving the game forwards. I expect before the release of 1.87 we will see the German ship come in. It's probably going to be, and I've completely forgotten the name of the ship. So it's 4:30 a.m. here. You know, I've just having a night of insomnia tonight, and I saw this pop up, and I had to make a video on it. Of course. But I sort of expect we'll see, because we're not really going to see anything like the we're sort of, we've got to a point where there's no real cruisers left. There's no real light cruisers left. The Rune, that's the one, the Rune class. So if we just quickly go to Google, see all my stuff. So if we look at the Rune class cruiser, the Rune class was a armoured cruiser. It wasn't a battle cruiser, it's an armoured cruiser. Now, an armoured cruiser is basically, it's similar to a battle cruiser. Now, battle cruisers were lightly armoured with heavy guns. Your armoured cruisers were lightly armed with heavy armour. But the Rune is a vehicle we could possibly see. It's a much earlier design, so it has that classic style of look to it. It's that earlier designed ship. Where on earth was I looking earlier today? Because there was a fantastic there was a fantastic thing on there. But the Rune would be a very good cruiser to have, and it would be a decent vehicle for the Germans. Now, it does have some relatively big guns on board. I think at 210 millimeters, so they're pretty heavy guns. And of course, there's lots of things from that other game. And I can't find what I'm looking for. But the Rune itself, you know, it would work in the fact that it's not going to be something that's really overpowered. It has the same armor as the Brooklyn, similar belt armor to the Brooklyn, similarly armored to the Brooklyn as well. So I expect we'll be seeing something like that coming in, and this leaves us open for some British heavy or battle cruisers. We could see some of the county class cruisers coming in, for instance. So that could be something. Sort of a county class cruiser is sort of a relatively heavy battle, sort of, again, armoured cruiser. Actually, even easier. HMS Barrack. If we look at HMS Barrack, for instance, Barrack is a good example. The Barrack was a relatively decent size county class cruiser. It's a heavy cruiser, basically. Just click on Wikipedia because that's the easiest way. If we look at the weight, it's 9.7 tons, which is about the weight of the ships we are looking at now, sort of coming into the game. Things like the Kirov and stuff like that, similar weights. But the Barrack, you know, the actual, if I can actually click on the right bloody thing, there we go. That's the modern one, isn't it? Yes, that is the modern HMS Barrack. Did I click on the right one in the beginning? Yes, I did, probably. There we go. So the HMS Barrack, you know, this style of ship would work pretty well. Very heavily armoured. If we look at the armaments, a lot of different armaments, but you know, about 203mm main guns. That's the sort of main guns you'd be looking at. Armour wise is sort of 4 inches, so about 100mm or so, sort of relatively similar to what we'll be getting in future. And that sort of thing, it's sort of the here we go, here's an actual photo of the Barrack. You know, it's not going to be something that's going to be game changing, but it's going to be relatively tough to kill. So for the Royal Navy, it could be an interesting one, and I would love to see more county class vehicles come in, especially the Barrack and stuff like that, because my granddad did serve on the Barrack. So, you know, personal want to see that in the game. But you know, this style of cruiser could easily come into the game now, because we're getting cruisers that are in the area where they're going to be bloody tough to go through. Even something like the Graf Spee. The Graf Spee is, again, a sort of... the Graf Spee is a pocket battleship, and what that means is basically it's a cruiser. The armour is not super heavy. So if you look at the armour, the belt armour is only 80mm, turret armour 140, but the main deck armour is around 17 to 45mm. The armour is not very good on these things. The Admiral Scheer class is not very heavily armed. However, these would be quite game-changing because it has big guns on board. They're 200 and... oh God, does it say on there? 11 inch. 11 inch. So no, that's not inch. Yeah, that's inch. So what's the gun? Millimeters. 280. Yeah, 280mm gun. Oh no, that's it. 280mm guns. So 11-inch guns. So these are basically battle class style guns, 280mm guns. So I can't see like something like the Graf Spee coming in, because simply it's a bit too... the guns are a bit too much. You know, this thing is going to be a big... if this came in, it would just completely obliterate every other ship in game. So sort of Graf Spee, sort of not quite yet. But something like the Rune would fit into what they're looking at. The trouble when you come to German ships of this era is, if we do a quick look for German ships of the time, so if we look at a list of the German cruisers from the time, you've got your protected cruisers, but these are sort of, you know, the old-fashioned ships from prior 1900s, so these aren't coming in, which is a shame. I would love to see some of this stuff come in, but things like we'll scroll down to sort of the moderner times. The light cruisers that we've sort of been getting so far are things like the Emden and the Köln as well. So, you know, which is a... I'm trying to remember what the Köln is now. Sure, that's not the right ship, but you know, the Köln and the Emden sort of thing, Königsberg, yeah, it is a Königsberg, so there we go, the Köln, there we go, Königsberg class cruisers. You know, these two are pretty much the top light cruisers. If we look at the Leipzig and the Nuremberg sort of thing, again, we might see the Leipzig come in, but it's not much of a difference over the prior ships. And again, sort of, if you look at the armour is very little. It's sort of still only got 150mm guns. It's got 9 of them, yeah, but that's not a big difference. But if you start looking at heavy cruisers, you know, the heavy cruisers are where you get sort of, the guns are a bit too big. Possibly the Prince Eugen, but again, that's a very heavy ship, very heavily armoured. But things like the armoured cruisers, such as the Rune, the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, probably not, you know, although, you know, it would be very cool to see them in. But the Rune and the Yorick might be a possibility, just because they're sort of, they're very interesting ships, but they're sort of there. the original. These are the of course the original Scharnhorst guys now, not the later variants of them, but they might be a bit too powerful. Whereas things like the Rune and the Yorick, even you could look at the Frederick Karl and Prince Albert, but I honestly get a feeling more towards the Rune and the Yorick. They're a little bit more close to what the sort of gameplay and the meta is coming to. Although they do have those very big guns, they are something that might work. Anyway, I've been babbling on long enough anyway, but yeah, that's what's happening at the moment. So that's some news for War Thunder. So yeah, we've got the Kirov in, we've got a heavy cruiser in. It's happened, even though it's classed as a light cruiser. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how this goes. These guns are going to be very, very strong. A bit like the Con, how it has those very accurate guns because of the barrel length. Similar thing's going to happen with these things. They're going to be super accurate and they're going to be super strong. This boat is going to be the one that's going to probably do a lot of damage. The Brooklyn class, if you get it at broadside, it should do a lot of damage. The armour is going to help the Brooklyn class as well, because the Brooklyn class has got some serious armour on board as well. If we do look at the Brooklyn, the Brooklyn is, it's got 15, I think it's 15 152mm guns, so some very big guns on board. And then you look at the actual belt armour, wherever that was, belt armour going up to a thickness of 127mm, deck armour of 51mm. This is more armour than the armoured cruisers of things like the Colne. So we're getting to ships that are becoming extremely strong, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. See my previous video about naval anyway. Alright, I'm going to try and go to sleep now. I will catch you all later. This is me, Carl Screezelat, out. Bye bye.